The great hall of the Galactic Council was silent. Ambassador Zixthala stood at the center of the chamber, her crystal skin flickering with colors that showed her fear. Around her, representatives from 47 different worlds sat in their floating chairs, watching her with worried eyes. Zixthala had never asked for help before. Her people, the crystalline hegemony, were proud and strong. They had ruled their corner of the galaxy for over 3,000 years. But now, for the first time in their long history, they were afraid. "Honored council members," Zixthala began, her voice shaking slightly. "I come before you today not as a proud ambassador, but as a desperate one. The Void Hunters have returned." A wave of shocked whispers ran through the chamber. The name Void Hunters was known to every species in the galaxy. They were machines, ancient and terrible, that appeared every few thousand years to consume entire star systems. The last time they came, 6 major civilizations had been wiped out completely. 3 cycles ago, they appeared in the Cathara system. Zixthala continued. "Our best ships, our strongest weapons, nothing stops them. They learn from every attack, they adapt to every strategy. They grow stronger with each world they consume." The representative from the Avian Federation, a tall bird-like creature with silver feathers, stood up. "Surely the combined fleet can handle this threat. We have the most advanced military technology in the galaxy." Zixthala's crystal skin turned a deep blue, the color of despair among her people. "We tried, honored Kethvek. The combined fleet engaged them at Proxima 7. We lost 40% of our ships in the first hour. The Void Hunters destroyed 3 more of our worlds while we retreated." The chamber erupted in frightened chatter. If the combined fleet could not stop the Void Hunters, what hope did any of them have? In the far corner of the chamber, Captain Jake Morrison sat quietly. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with short brown hair and calm blue eyes. Next to him sat Dr. Helen Price, the human civilian representative. They were the newest members of the Galactic Council, having joined only 20 years ago when Earth made first contact. Most of the other species still looked down on humans. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world, a planet so dangerous that most aliens needed special equipment just to visit. The other council members thought humans were primitive warriors who barely deserved a place in civilized space. Zixthala looked around the chamber with desperate eyes. "I have come to ask for something that my people have never asked for before. We need military assistance. We need every species to contribute their best ships and soldiers." "What about the humans?" asked a voice from the back. Everyone turned to look at the speaker. It was Morgoth, the representative from the Insectoid Collective. His bug-like features twisted into what might have been a smile. "Surely the famous Deathworlders want to join this fight?" The chamber filled with nervous laughter. Many of the representatives saw this as a joke. Humans had fast ships and decent weapons, but they had never faced a real threat like the Void Hunters. Jake Morrison stood up slowly. His calm presence seemed to fill the large chamber. "Ambassador Zixthala," he said in a clear, steady voice, "Earth accepts your request for military assistance." The laughter stopped immediately. Several representatives looked shocked. "Captain Morrison," said the Federation representative, "surely you understand the scale of this threat. The Void Hunters have destroyed civilizations that were ancient. When your species first discovered fire," Jake nodded. "I understand completely. That's why we're going to stop them." The simple confidence in his voice surprised everyone. Dr. Price stood up next to him. "The human government has already been briefed on this situation. Our military is prepared to mobilize immediately." Zixthala stared at the 2 humans. You would really help us? Even though most of the galaxy treats your people as outsiders?" "That's what we do," Jake said simply. "Someone calls for help, we answer." On the other side of the galaxy, alarms were already sounding on Luna Base. Admiral Lisa Chun stood in the command center, reading the priority message that had just arrived. From Earth, she was a small woman with short black hair and sharp dark eyes. But everyone in the room knew she was one of the best military minds humanity had ever produced. "Get me Colonel Ben Parker on Mars," she ordered. and contact Captain Ryan Hayes on the Relentless. Tell him to prepare his battle group for immediate deployment. The message from Earth was clear. The Void Hunters were back, and humanity was going to war. On Mars Military Station, Colonel Ben Parker was already moving. He was a veteran soldier with graying hair and scars from a dozen battles. His job was to organize the expeditionary force, and he was very good at his job. "How many ships can we deploy?" he asked his aide, Major Kyle Stevens. "The entire 7th Fleet is ready for action," Stevens replied. "Plus support vessels from the 3rd and 5th Fleets. We're looking at about 200 ships total," Parker nodded. "Good. What about ground forces?" 15,000 Marines, all volunteers. They're already boarding the transport ships. Within 6 hours of receiving the distress call, the human military machine was in motion. Ships launched from bases on Earth, Luna, Mars, and a dozen colony worlds. Supply vessels loaded with ammunition, spare parts, and medical supplies followed close behind, back in the Galactic Council chamber. The other representatives watched in amazement as reports came in about human mobilization. Most species took weeks or even months to organize a military response. The humans had done it in less than a day. "How is this possible?" asked the avian representative. Jake Morrison's expression was grim. "We've been preparing for this kind of threat since we joined the galactic community. Earth has a saying, hope for the best, prepare for the worst." Dr. Price added, "What you need to understand is that humans have been fighting for survival our entire history. War is not something we do sometimes. It's something we're always ready for." The representatives began to whisper among themselves. Maybe these Deathworlders were not as primitive as they had thought. Zixtala approached the human delegation. Her crystal skin was now showing colors of hope mixed with fear. "Captain Morrison, I must ask, do you really believe you can stop them? The Void Hunters have destroyed species far more advanced than humans." Jake looked at her with those calm blue eyes. "Ambassador, I don't know if we can stop them, but I know we're going to try with everything we have. And I know something else." "What is that?" "Humans don't give up. Ever. No matter how bad things get, no matter how hopeless it looks, we keep fighting until we win, or there's nothing left to fight with." For the first time in 3 cycles, Zixtala felt something other than despair. These strange creatures from the death world called Earth might actually have a chance. The council session ended with formal authorization for human military intervention. As the representatives filed out, many of them were already placing private bets on how long the human fleet would last against the Void Hunters. None of them understood what was really coming. The galaxy was about to learn why humans called Earth home. The news spread across human space faster than light itself. Every military base, every colony, every ship in the fleet received the same message. The galaxy was under attack, and Earth was going to war. Admiral Lisa Chun stood on the command deck of Luna Base, watching through the massive windows as ships began to gather. The sight would have amazed any alien observer. Human vessels were not like the elegant, streamlined ships that other species preferred. They were thick, angular monsters that looked like they had been built for one purpose only: to fight and survive. The flagship of the fleet was already moving into position. The used Defiance was a massive dreadnought that stretched nearly 2 kilometers from nose to tail. Its hull was covered in armor plating that could withstand direct hits from plasma cannons. Weapon ports dotted every surface, giving it the appearance of a giant metal porcupine. "Admiral," said Commander Tim Brooks, her aide, "the Defiance is requesting permission to begin final preparations." "Granted," Chun replied. "And get me Captain Hayes on the Relentless. I want his battle group ready to move in 12 hours. Brooks nodded and hurried away. Chun turned back to the window, watching as more ships arrived. Heavy cruisers, destroyers, carriers, and support vessels were forming up in perfect formation. The speed of the mobilization was incredible. Even by human standards on Mars Military Station, Colonel Ben Parker was dealing with his own preparations. The main hangar was filled with activity as thousands of Marines loaded equipment onto transport ships. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were volunteers who had specifically requested to fight on hostile worlds. Major Kyle Stevens approached Parker with a datapad in his hand. "Sir, we have a problem. The Galactic Council is sending observers to monitor our fleet. They want to see how we handle the situation," Parker frowned. "Observers? What kind of observers?" "Military experts from 6 different species. They'll be stationed on the Defiance during the operation." "Fine," Parker said. "Let them watch. Maybe they'll learn something." Stevens smiled. He knew what Parker was thinking. The aliens had no idea what they were about to see. 3 hours later, the observers arrived at Luna Base. They were a mixed group, a tall, thin creature from the Ethereal Collective, 2 bird-like beings from the Avian Federation, a crystalline officer from the Hegemony, and others. All of them were experienced military personnel, and all of them looked skeptical. The leader of the group was General Kethmore, a veteran officer from the Federation. He had fought in dozens of battles and considered himself an expert on military tactics. As they boarded the Defiance, he was already making notes about human inefficiency. "Look at this ship," he whispered to his aide. "It's so heavily armored that it must be incredibly slow. And all those weapons. It's wasteful. A properly designed vessel should be fast and precise, not a floating fortress." His aide, a younger officer named Veltar, nodded in agreement. "The humans clearly don't understand modern warfare. This ship looks like something from the old aggressive wars, not a tool for fighting an advanced enemy like the Void Hunters." They were wrong, but they would not realize it for several more days. Admiral Chun welcomed the observers aboard the Defiance personally. She was polite but businesslike, showing them to their quarters and explaining the basic layout of the ship. The aliens were surprised by how cramped everything seemed compared to their own vessels. "Admiral," General Kethmore said, "I must ask about your strategy. The Void Hunters are extremely advanced. They adapt to any tactic within minutes. How do you plan to deal with this?" Shun smiled, and for a moment Kethmore felt a chill run down his spine. There was something in that smile that reminded him of a predator. "General," she said, "the thing about adaptation is that it requires predictable patterns to work. Humans don't really do predictable." Before Kethmore could ask what she meant, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The mobilization was complete. It was time to leave. The human fleet that assembled in Earth orbit was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. 200 ships formed up in a formation that looked chaotic to alien eyes but made perfect sense to human commanders. Heavy ships were mixed with fast attack vessels. Carriers launched fighters for patrol duty, and the fighters moved in patterns that seemed random but covered every possible approach vector. Captain Ryan Hayes stood on the bridge of his heavy cruiser, the UES Relentless. He was a combat veteran with short gray hair and steady hands. His ship was smaller than the Defiance, but just as heavily armed. The Relentless had been designed for one specific job: getting close to enemy ships and destroying them. "Captain," his tactical officer said, "we're receiving final orders from the Admiral." Hayes nodded. "Put it on the main screen." Admiral Chen appeared on the view screen, her image being broadcast to every ship in the fleet. Behind her, the observers watched with growing amazement as they realized the scale of what they were seeing. "All ships," Chun began, "you know why we're here. The galaxy is under attack by an enemy that has destroyed civilizations older than recorded human history. Other species have tried to stop them and failed. Now it's our turn." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "I want every one of you to remember something. We are not here to prove ourselves to the galaxy. We are not here to show off our technology. We are here to do what humans have always done when faced with an impossible situation. We are here to win." The alien observers exchanged glances. The confidence in her voice was either inspiring or terrifying, depending on your point of view. "The Void Hunters think they understand warfare," Chun continued. "They think they can adapt to any strategy. They're wrong. They've never faced humans before. They've never had to deal with an enemy that doesn't follow rules, doesn't give up, and doesn't know when to quit." On the bridge of the Relentless, Hayes smiled. He had served under Chun for 6 years, and he knew that tone of voice. Someone was about to learn a very hard lesson. "All ships, prepare for a hyperspace jump," Chun ordered. "We're going to show the galaxy what Deathworlders can do." The jump coordinates were locked in. The Cathara system, where the Void Hunters were currently consuming their fourth world. The trip would take 36 hours at maximum speed. As the fleet prepared to jump, the alien observers finally began to understand something important. Human ships were not built to be fast or elegant. They were built to survive. The thick armor, the redundant systems, the massive weapons arrays, everything was designed around the assumption that human ships would take terrible damage and keep fighting. General Kethmer watched through a porthole as the stars began to shift. The hyperspace jump was beginning, and with it, the galaxy's first real test of human military power. "Admiral," he asked Chun quietly, "what makes you so confident?" "The Void Hunters have defeated every military force they've encountered." Chun looked at him with those steady dark eyes. "General, let me tell you something about humans. We come from a world that tries to kill us every single day, whether that can freeze you solid or cook you alive. Animals that hunt us for food, diseases that can wipe out entire cities, earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, floods." She pointed out the porthole at the swirling colors of hyperspace. "We didn't develop space travel to explore the universe. We developed it to survive. Every human ship, every weapon, every tactic we use has been tested against the worst conditions imaginable." Kethmer felt that chill again. "I see. No," Chun said softly. "You don't, but you will." The human fleet continued its journey toward the battle zone, carrying with it the hopes of an entire galaxy. Behind them, Earth continued its preparations. More ships were being readied, more soldiers were volunteering, and more weapons were being loaded. The galaxy was about to learn why humans called their world home, and why that made all the difference. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Cathara system, and immediately every person on every ship fell silent. The destruction was beyond anything they had imagined. Where the second planet should have been, there was only empty space and a cloud of metallic debris. The third planet was half gone, its surface being stripped away by massive mechanical harvesters that looked like giant metal spiders. The fourth planet was completely covered in a dark, writhing mass of machinery that pulsed with an evil red light. "Mother of God?" whispered Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez from her position on the bridge of the destroyer UES Courage. She had seen combat before, but nothing like this. Admiral Chun stood on the command deck of the Defiance, watching the tactical display with cold eyes. The alien observers beside her were making sounds of horror and disbelief. General Kethmer's feathers were turning pale with shock. "Admiral," reported Commander Brooks, "we're detecting approximately 800 enemy vessels in the system. They range from small harvesters to massive command ships. All of them appear to be mechanical in nature." "What about the defending fleet?" Chun asked. "We're picking up scattered signals from about 30 ships, all in full retreat toward the system's edge. They appear to be from multiple species: Crystalline Hegemony, Avian Federation, Insectoid Collective, and others." Chun nodded grimly. The combined fleet that had entered this system a week ago with over 300 ships was now reduced to a handful of survivors running for their lives. On the bridge of the Relentless, Captain Ryan Hayes was studying the enemy formations. The Void Hunters moved in perfect geometric patterns, their ships arranged in mathematical precision. Every movement was calculated, every position optimized for maximum efficiency. "Sir," his tactical officer said, "the enemy has detected us. They're beginning to move in our direction." Hayes smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Good. Signal the fleet, all ships, prepare for immediate attack." The alien observers on the Defiance stared in shock as they heard the order. General Kethmer turned to Admiral Chun with disbelief clear in his voice. "Admiral, surely you're not planning to attack immediately? Standard tactical doctrine requires reconnaissance, analysis of enemy capabilities, development of strategy." Chun cut him off. General, standard, tactical doctrine is exactly what got your combined fleet destroyed. We're going to try something different. She opened a communication channel to the entire human fleet. All ships, this is Admiral Chun. You can see what we're facing. These machines have been adapting to standard military tactics for thousands of years. They know every conventional strategy ever used. She paused, looking out at the enemy swarm that was beginning to accelerate toward them. But they've never faced humans before? They don't know about the siege of Manila or the Battle of Stalingrad or any of the 10,000 desperate fights our species has survived. Today, we're going to teach them something new. The communication channel crackled as Captain Hayes' voice came through. Admiral, request permission to begin the assault. Granted, Captain. Show them what we learned on the Death World. What happened next became legendary throughout the galaxy. Instead of forming defensive lines or attempting complex maneuvers, the human fleet did something that horrified every military expert watching. They charged straight into the heart of the enemy formation. The Relentless led the attack. Its engines burning at maximum power as it headed directly for the largest concentration of Void Hunter ships. Behind it came 50 other vessels. All following the same seemingly suicidal course, the Void Hunters immediately began to adapt. Their formation shifted to create a killing field, positioning their ships to deliver maximum firepower at the approaching humans. Their tactics were perfect, mathematically precise, and should have destroyed the attacking fleet within minutes, but human tactics were not precise. They were chaotic, unpredictable, and completely insane by galactic standards. As the fleets closed to combat range, the human ships suddenly scattered in all directions. Some dove below the enemy formation, others climbed above it, and still others weaved through gaps that shouldn't have existed. The Void Hunters' perfectly calculated firing solutions became useless as their targets moved in patterns that defied logic. Remember Terra? Captain Hayes shouted as the Relentless opened fire with every weapon it had. The ship's massive guns pumped round after round into the nearest enemy vessel, while its point defense systems shot down incoming missiles. The Void Hunter ship tried to adapt to the human weapons, adjusting its shields and armor to counter the attack. But before it could complete the process, another human ship attacked it from a completely different angle. Using different weapons and different tactics, Commander Amy Rodriguez brought her destroyer, the Courage, in fast and low. Her ship was smaller than the Relentless, but it was fast and heavily armed. She targeted the enemy ship's engines, pumping plasma bolts into its rear section until it began to drift helplessly. The battle quickly spread throughout the system. Human ships engaged the enemy at point-blank range, taking damage that should have forced them to retreat, but continuing to fight anyway. The thick armor that other species had mocked proved its worth as human vessels absorbed punishment that would have destroyed more elegant ships on the Defiance. The alien observers watched in amazement and growing horror. The humans were fighting like madmen, taking risks that no sane military force would consider, yet somehow it was working. "They're completely insane," whispered General Kethmore. "That destroyer just rammed an enemy harvester ship." "Both vessels are destroyed," Admiral Chun nodded. That was Commander Rodriguez. She saw that the enemy ship was about to escape with stolen planetary material. She chose to stop it. But she killed herself in the process. Yes, and in doing so, she prevented that material from being used to build more enemy ships. One human life in exchange for potentially dozens of enemy vessels that will never be built. It's a good trade. The alien could not understand this logic. In galactic warfare, preserving your own forces was the highest priority. Deliberate sacrifice was considered wasteful and primitive, but the Void Hunters were beginning to understand. Their adaptation algorithms were struggling to process the chaotic human tactics. Every time they adjusted to counter one attack pattern, the humans would switch to something completely different. It was like trying to predict the path of a storm. Major Kyle Stevens led a boarding action against a damaged Void Hunter command ship. His Marines stormed through airlocks that were still glowing from plasma burns, fighting their way through corridors filled with mechanical defenders. The environment inside the enemy ship would have killed most alien species within minutes. The atmosphere was toxic, the temperature was well below freezing, and the artificial gravity kept shifting randomly. But Stevens and his Marines had trained for exactly these conditions. They moved through the hostile environment like they belonged. There. Target the central processing core, Stevens ordered over the radio. If we can take out their coordination center, the smaller ships in this sector will be confused. His team fought room by room through the enemy vessel, using tactics that the Void Hunters had never encountered. Instead of advancing in formation, the humans split up and attacked from multiple directions. Instead of trying to preserve their equipment, they used grenades and explosives with reckless abandon. The battle raged for 18 hours. Human ships continued fighting even after their hulls were breached, their weapons damaged, and their crews wounded. The sight of a human destroyer with half its armor blown away, still firing its remaining guns, became a symbol that would inspire the galaxy for generations. As the hours passed, something remarkable began to happen. The scattered remains of the original defending fleet started to return. Crystalline hegemony cruisers that had fled in defeat saw the humans holding their ground and decided to rejoin the fight. Avian Federation destroyers came about and began supporting human assault groups. The tide of battle was turning, and for the first time in millennia, the Void Hunters were facing something they could not adapt to: the pure, stubborn refusal of humans to accept defeat. The battle had been raging for 20 hours when Colonel Sam Torres made a decision that would change everything. Standing on the bridge of the Marine assault ship Hughes Hammer, he looked at the tactical display showing the largest Void Hunter command vessel. It was a massive structure almost the size of a small moon, covered in weapons and coordination arrays. "Sir," said his aide, Lieutenant Dan Miller, "intelligence reports show that ship is the central command nexus for this entire sector. If we could take it out, we'd cripple their coordination for hundreds of ships," Torres finished. He was a tough man with graying hair and scars from a dozen battles on hostile worlds. His eyes studied the enemy ship with the calculating look of a predator. The problem was getting to it. The command nexus was surrounded by layers of defensive ships and was positioned in the middle of a toxic gas cloud that leaked from the half-destroyed third planet. The environment would kill most alien species within minutes. "Lieutenant Miller," Torres said, "prepare the assault teams. Full environmental gear. We're going aboard that thing." Miller stared at him. "Sir, the atmospheric readings from that area. The toxicity levels are off the charts. Even our allies can't survive in that environment." Torres smiled grimly. "Good thing we're not like our allies." Within an hour, 6 assault shuttles launched from the Hammer, heading straight for the command nexus. Each shuttle carried 20 Marines in full-powered armor, equipment designed to operate in the most hostile environments imaginable. The suits were bulky and ungraceful compared to the elegant gear used by other species, but they could keep a human alive in conditions that would dissolve alien tissue. The alien observers on the Defiance watched in shock as the human shuttles flew directly through the toxic cloud surrounding the enemy ship. General Kethmer turned to Admiral Chun with disbelief in his voice. "Admiral, those toxin levels would kill my people in seconds. How are your soldiers surviving in there?" Chun's expression was calm. "General, humans evolved on a world where the very air can kill you if you're in the wrong place. We've learned to adapt." The assault shuttles reached the command nexus and began cutting through its outer hull. Torres was in the lead shuttle, watching as his engineers used plasma torches to burn through armor that was 3 meters thick. The Void Hunters had built their ship to resist conventional weapons, but they had not planned for humans with cutting tools and complete disregard for safety protocols. "Breach in 30 seconds, reported Sergeant Kate Wilson, the team's demolitions expert. Hull integrity is compromised. Atmosphere inside appears to be a methane-ammonia mix with trace sulfur compounds." "Sounds like home," Torres replied, earning laughs from his team. They had all trained on worlds where the air would kill unprotected humans in minutes. The Marines poured through the breach and into the enemy ship. The environment inside was even worse than expected. The corridors were filled with a thick, greenish fog that would have been instantly lethal to most galactic species. The temperature was below freezing, and the artificial gravity kept shifting randomly as damaged systems failed, but Torres and his Marines moved through the hostile environment like they belonged there. Their powered armor not only protected them from the toxic atmosphere, but also gave them enhanced strength and speed. They advanced through the ship's corridors like an unstoppable force, the Void. Hunters tried to stop them with mechanical defenders, but human tactics proved devastatingly effective in close quarters. Instead of fighting in formation like civilized soldiers, the Marines split up and attacked from multiple directions. They used grenades in enclosed spaces, shot through walls when direct attack was impossible, and generally fought like the products of a death world. Meanwhile, across the battle zone, Lieutenant Nicole Wright was working on a different kind of breakthrough. She was the communications specialist aboard the cruiser UES Liberty, and she had been studying the Void Hunter coordination signals for hours. "Captain Morris," she called to her commanding officer, "I think I've cracked their communication frequency." "Captain." Alex Morris, a veteran officer with steady nerves and quick thinking, moved to her station. "Can you jam it?" "Better than that, sir. I can hijack it." Wright had discovered that the Void Hunters used a complex but rigid communication protocol. Their signals were perfectly organized, mathematically precise, and completely logical. It was exactly the kind of system that could be disrupted by something chaotic and unpredictable. "Sir," she said with growing excitement, "what if instead of jamming their frequency, we flood it with something they can't process?" "What did you have in mind, Lieutenant?" Wright smiled. "Everything that makes us human." Within minutes, she had connected the ship's computer database to the Void Hunter communication network. Then she did something that no military tactician in galactic history had ever attempted. She began broadcasting human culture directly into the enemy's coordination system. Music from every era of human history flooded the Void Hunter network. Classical symphonies, rock and roll, jazz, folk songs, and electronic music all played simultaneously. Poetry and literature followed, Shakespeare and ancient epics, modern novels and children's stories, love letters and war songs. The effect on the Void Hunters was immediate and devastating. Their coordination system had been designed to process pure information, logical data streams that could be analyzed and understood. But human culture was chaotic, emotional, contradictory, and completely impossible to categorize. Art and music and stories crashed through their network like a digital tsunami. The Void Hunters' adaptation algorithms, which had successfully countered every military strategy for millennia, simply could not handle the pure chaos of human creativity. Ships that had been moving in perfect formation suddenly began drifting aimlessly. Weapons that had been firing with mathematical precision stopped working as their targeting systems crashed. Command signals that should have coordinated hundreds of vessels became scrambled and useless on the bridge of the Liberty. Captain Morris watched in amazement as enemy ships throughout the system began to malfunction. "Lieutenant Wright, what exactly did you do?" "I gave them a dose of human culture, sir." "Looks like they can't handle it." Colonel Torres and his Marines were fighting their way through the command nexus when the enemy coordination system collapsed. Suddenly, the mechanical defenders stopped moving in organized patterns and began attacking randomly, often hitting each other instead of the humans. "Whatever just happened," Torres said over the radio, "it's working in our favor. All teams, push forward to the central core." The Marines fought room by room through the massive ship, using human tactics that the Void Hunters could not counter. They moved like hunters on a death world, adapting to every situation and refusing to give up no matter how bad things got. Meanwhile, the effect of the communications disruption was spreading throughout the battle. Human ships that had been struggling against superior numbers suddenly found their enemies confused and disorganized. Captain Alex Turner, commanding the destroyer Use Resilient, immediately saw the opportunity. "All human ships," he broadcast. "The enemy coordination is down. This is our chance. Form up for a combined assault." Something remarkable happened next. The alien ships that had fled earlier, the survivors of the original combined fleet, began returning to the battle. Crystalline hegemony cruisers, avian Federation destroyers, and ships from a dozen other species all moved to support the human attack. For the first time in the battle, the various galactic species were working together. Under human coordination, Captain Turner found himself directing a fleet of 200 ships from 15 different species, all following tactics that no military academy had ever taught. The Void Hunters, cut off from their central coordination and unable to adapt to the chaotic mix of human unpredictability and alien support, began to fall back. For the first time in recorded history, they were losing a battle on the command nexus. Torres and his Marines finally reached the central core. It was a massive chamber filled with processing equipment that hummed with malevolent energy. Torres looked at the alien technology and made a decision that summed up humanity's approach to impossible problems. "Sergeant Wilson," he said, "how much explosive do we have left?" "Enough to level a city block, sir." "Good. Let's see how well their adaptation works against a chain reaction explosion." The galaxy was about to learn why humans had survived on the most dangerous world anyone had ever discovered. The explosion that destroyed the Void Hunter command nexus could be seen from 3 star systems away. Colonel Torres and his Marines had placed their charges perfectly, targeting the ship's main power core and coordination systems. When the detonation came, it sent a chain reaction through the massive vessel that tore it apart from the inside. Torres and his team made it to their extraction shuttles with less than 30 seconds to spare. As they flew away from the dying ship, the colonel watched through the shuttle's rear window as the command nexus collapsed into itself, taking with it the coordination hub for over half the Void Hunter fleet. "Sir," said Sergeant Wilson, "that was too close even for us." Torres smiled. "Close doesn't count except in explosives. And we're very good with explosives." Across the battle zone, the effect of losing their command ship was immediate. Void Hunter vessels that had been moving with perfect coordination suddenly began operating independently. Their adaptation systems, cut off from the central processing network, could no longer share information or develop unified responses to human tactics. Captain Alex Turner seized the moment. From the bridge of the U's Resilient, he coordinated the largest multi-species attack in galactic history. Human ships worked alongside crystalline hegemony cruisers, avian Federation destroyers, and vessels from a dozen other species. For the first time, they were all fighting as one united force. "All ships," Turner broadcast, "concentrate fire on the harvester vessels. If we can stop them from consuming the remaining planets, we cut off their ability to build reinforcements." The combined fleet moved like a single organism, each species contributing its unique strengths under human coordination. The aliens provided speed and precision, while the humans provided the aggressive tactics and willingness to take risks that turned the tide of battle. Lieutenant Nicole Wright continued her assault on the Void Hunter communication network. She had expanded her cultural broadcast to include human history, philosophy, and even comedy. The chaotic mix of information was causing cascade failures throughout the enemy fleet. "Captain Morris," she reported, "their entire network is collapsing. I'm detecting system failures across 90% of their remaining ships." Captain Morris nodded grimly. "Keep it up, Lieutenant. We're winning, but they're not finished yet." The battle raged for another 6 hours, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. Cut off from their coordination and unable to adapt to the chaotic mix of human unpredictability and alien cooperation, the Void Hunters began to retreat. One by one, their ships stopped fighting and started moving toward the edge of the system, but Admiral Chun was not about to let them escape. "All ships," she ordered, "pursue and destroy. We cannot allow any of them to survive and warn other Void Hunter fleets about our tactics." The final hunt lasted 2 days. Human ships led the pursuit, their heavily armored hulls allowing them to follow the enemy into asteroid fields and plasma storms where more fragile vessels could not go. The aliens learned to trust human judgment in environments that would normally be considered impassable. When the last Void Hunter ship was destroyed, a strange silence fell over the Cathara system. For the first time in weeks, the red glow of enemy machinery was gone. The surviving worlds were safe, and the galaxy had witnessed something unprecedented. The complete defeat of the Void Hunters. The news spread faster than light itself. Across thousands of worlds, billions of beings learned that the ancient terror that had haunted the galaxy for millennia was finally gone. And they learned who had defeated them, the humans from the death world called Earth. On the bridge of the Defiance, the alien military observers stood in stunned silence. General Kethmer looked at Admiral Chun with an expression of awe and fear. "How?" he asked simply. "How did you do what no one else could?" Chun looked out at the debris field that had once been an unstoppable enemy fleet. "General," you asked, "me before what made us confident?" The answer is simple. We come from a world that never stops trying to kill us. Every day, every hour, we fight to survive. War isn't something we do sometimes, it's what we are. 3 weeks later, the Galactic Council convened for an emergency session. The Great Chamber was packed with representatives from every known species. All of them eager to hear the official report on humanity's victory. Ambassador Zixtella stood at the center of the chamber, her crystal skin glowing with colors of gratitude and respect. "Honored council members," she began, "I come before you today to formally thank the human government for their assistance in our darkest hour." The chamber erupted in applause that lasted for several minutes. When it finally died down, Zixtella continued. "The crystalline hegemony has survived because of human courage and sacrifice. We owe them a debt that can never be repaid." Captain Jake Morrison stood to address the council. He looked different now, no longer the representative of a minor species, but the spokesman for the galaxy's most formidable military force. "The human government appreciates the council's gratitude," he said formally. "However, we must discuss the future. Our intelligence services have identified at least 6 other external threats that have been probing galactic defenses. The Void Hunters were just the beginning." The chamber fell silent. The idea that there were other threats like the Void Hunters was terrifying, Morrison continued. "Earth is prepared to serve as the galaxy's primary defense force. But we have conditions." The word conditions sent a ripple of surprise through the chamber. No one expected the humans to make demands. "First," Morrison said, "humanity requires full voting rights in this council, equal to any major species. Second, we need unrestricted access to galactic technology and resources. Third, human colonies will be established at strategic points throughout known space." Some of the representatives looked angry at these demands, but General Kethmer stood up. "The Avian Federation supports all human requests. We have seen what happens when we ignore the warnings of those who understand warfare." One by one, other species added their support. The crystalline hegemony, the insectoid collective, even the proud ethereal assembly voted in favor of humanity's conditions. They had all learned the same lesson. It was better to have humans as allies than to face the galaxy's enemies alone. 6 months later, the changes were already visible throughout known space. Human ships patrolled the outer borders, their distinctive angular hulls serving as a warning to any potential invaders. New colonies were being established on worlds that other species considered too dangerous to inhabit. On Kepler 442b, a volcanic world with toxic storms and acid rain, children from 12 different species played together in the human settlement's protected zones. Their favorite game was called Void Hunters, where some children played the role of mechanical invaders while others pretended to be human marines. "Remember, Terra," the children would shout as they charged into imaginary battle, copying the tactics they had heard about in stories of the Great Victory. Their parents watched from nearby, no longer afraid of the night sky. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of known space, other threats might be gathering, ancient evils might be stirring. Unknown enemies might be planning invasion, but the galaxy slept peacefully, knowing that the Deathworlders stood guard on Earth in the military command center beneath Luna Base. Admiral Chun stood before a massive star map showing the current positions of all human fleet units. Red indicators marked the locations of potential threats, while blue dots showed the positions of human ships and bases. Dr. Helen Price entered the command center carrying a datapad filled with intelligence reports. "Admiral," she said, "we're getting strange readings from the Magellanic clouds. Something big is moving out there." Chin studied the data for a moment, then smiled. It was the same Predator smile that had frightened General Kethmore months earlier. "How long until we can get a fleet out there?" she asked. 72 hours for full deployment." "Good. Alert the colonies. Tell them we might have another situation developing." As Price hurried away to relay the orders, Chin turned back to the star map. Somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, something was moving towards civilized space. It might be traders, explorers, or refugees seeking a new home, or it might be another threat that needed to learn why the galaxy was now under the protection of the species that called Earth home. Either way, humanity would be ready. They always were.